September of 1944, 19-year-old Dorothy Jean Purcell and her 38-year-old husband Ben Levine, a shoe salesman, had been holed up at the Cecil Hotel for several nights prior to the morning the young woman would awaken to the feeling of what would turn out to be intense labor pains. Claiming later not to have known she was pregnant, plus not wanting to wake her husband up because what proud new pop would want his sleep interrupted by something as silly as the surprise birth of his child, this resourceful teen girl opts to go all the way to the shared restroom located on their same floor and to just try and give birth in there. Once inside, that's what she does. The teenager proceeds to deliver the baby inside that dingy communal bathroom all alone. After she gives birth, once again without any assistance, I imagine Dorothy starts to realize that the responsibilities of being a young mother, alone in a shoddy hotel bathroom, mind you, are much harder than she or her giggling girlfriends from back in her middle school pregnancy pack days ever stopped to imagine they would be. Maybe something about that baby she's staring at that begins in her the sinking realization that this is so different from that sack of flowers she once had to babysit for a week. God only knows what goes on in her head at this point, or how she really rationalizes her next odd move. We do know that before cleaning herself up and returning to the room she shares with her significantly older partner, Dorothy Purcell makes a monumental decision that will ensure her name goes down in the annals of Cecil Hotel history. In a nutshell, our 19-year-old new mom, she locates a window out of which she proceeds to chuck her newborn baby out, without even so much as giving him a kiss, much less a name beforehand. Tossed from just quote-unquote high up, as authorities will later come to know, the infant the world will ever only known as plain baby boy Purcell plummets before landing on the roof of an adjacent building where he will remain for now. Later, the infant will be recovered sadly from this very same spot. Just as for now, Dorothy doesn't appear too concerned with this, and she seems numb to the reality of her actions altogether. Because if you think about it, that was the sum of all that poor human child ever got to know or experience. Think about it. Lights on, and then just as quickly, then it's just lights out. Forever again. Anyway, and moving right along. As for Dorothy, who, by the looks of it, saw this whole giving birth incident as a surprising inconvenience more than the joy it should have been, well, now having completed that pesky chore of disposing of the newborn child, cleaning off all the mess, and ensuring herself presentable once again, Dorothy returns to her room. It's said that she never does feel a need nor see any reason to tell her husband, the presumed father, about any of what just has taken place. It's strictly my presumption, but perhaps she just quietly crawls right back into bed next to Ben, and having been so inconsiderately awakened just earlier, maybe Dorothy makes an attempt to now catch up on her much-needed beauty sleep. It may not be surprising given it was almost one full century ago when this event took place, but there exists quite little documentation on this story, at least that I could personally find. We know this 19-year-old has just given birth in secret in a communal bathroom at a hotel where this couple has been staying, and we know she's tossed her infant out a bathroom window. What's also known is what happens once she's apprehended, which don't worry, we'll get to in a moment. What exactly happens in between is what we're not entirely sure of. More specifically, how does she get caught? Regardless, the good news in all of this is that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter too much how the accused was ultimately caught. The most important thing is that she was. In the end, the one thing that we know for certain is that the newborn is recovered from the nearby roof, and Dorothy Jean Purcell is ultimately brought in on murder charges. Except that this already twisted story doesn't altogether end there, or rather, it doesn't end that easily. Now on trial for the murder of her own newborn son, when Dorothy is questioned as to why she tossed her baby out the window, Dorothy states that she had believed the child was already dead at the time she did it. Just to make sure everyone heard, I'll say that again. Dorothy tells the court that when the baby was born, she believed that the baby was dead, and so that is the reason she then decided to throw him out of a window on a very high story of a very public building. Forget calling the LAPD and inconveniencing them with your little dead baby problem. No, let's just toss him out of a window, just all haphazard like that. I'm sorry, but seriously, anybody that's actually innocent isn't likely gonna think of disposing of their baby's body that way. It's demented. Dorothy was evidently being secretive from the get-go when, not to quote-unquote wake her husband up, she opted to deliver the baby all alone in a filthy public restroom. On top of that, when the baby's found, supposedly stillborn, her first thought is to ditch him out a window, after which she comes back to her room like she wasn't doing anything more special than just taking a big smelly dump, and it just happens to slip her mind to even tell her husband. She forgets to even tell him about the event. This amounts to some pretty odd and honestly guilty behavior. Unfortunately for the girl, Dorothy, an autopsy would easily contradict her tall tales. County autopsy surgeon Frank R. Webb would testify that during the post-mortem examination, he could see that the baby's lungs had filled with air, meaning, of course, that the boy had been alive at the time that he was tossed from the window. Alive. Categorically, with no doubt, alive, breathing, and presumably well. So many parents out there just dying to have children and can't, and this selfish little snot just heaves her baby out a freaking window. But at any rate, she's cornered by the coroner's testimony, it would seem, except believe it or not, there's at least one more twist to the story. It's just when we start to think maybe here's a story where justice will prevail, well, enter the expert witnesses in psychiatry. I'm not against psychiatry, I actually majored in psychology with the intention of pursuing psychiatry myself. It's simply that too many times I've come to draw the reluctant conclusion that even nowadays in some cases, psychiatrists and courtrooms do not mix. This is one of those cases, because thanks to the testimony of 3 court-appointed psychiatric specialists, no word on if these people are even doctors or what their expertise really was, but thanks to testimony of these 3, who each testified to the belief that Dorothy was mentally confused, our murdery would-be mom is found ultimately to be not guilty by reason of insanity. Case closed. How she would go on to find a man that wanted anything to do with her after what she did to that poor child is the second big mystery surrounding this case. But yes, following her acquittal, Dorothy, finding herself a free woman, later goes on to remarry, and unlike her own little victim could ever claim for himself, well, at least she goes on to enjoy a pretty long life. Specifically, she dies at the age of 74, the only good part of this whole story really being that, thank God that for whatever reason, she never ever had another child again. And that concludes the story of baby boy Purcell, Death Hotel's youngest victim. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and do consider subscribing as well if you haven't already. With that said, I look forward to seeing everyone back next time. Stay safe.